Today we are doing a tier list of not all the genres because that's impossible, but a lot of the main metal genres. I do want to say one thing though. When I'm ranking these, I'm going to think of two factors. One is just the definition of what the genre is. Just to say an example, thrash metal, the whole point of it is to be really, really fast. That's the point of it. So I kind of have to think of what the genre is supposed to sound like and kind of determine just from that if that's a good idea for a genre, or if that genre, if the idea for that being a genre would sound good. And then also all the bands that are in that genre. So like, Metallica, Slayer, whatever. The combination of those two things are going to determine their place on this list. All that being said, I am going to go ahead and get started, and I'm just going to go in the order of how I dropped them into my Photoshop project here. So Viking metal, I mentioned this in my video for Baby Metal, the second one that I made for their newest album. I don't think they've released a new album since that video, but I mentioned that any genre that is like super specific to like Vikings or goblins or pirates or whatever, as a genre, it sucks. It's a stupid idea because how much material can you possibly come up with that specific of an idea? And all of the bands that I've heard that do that kind of music suck, like, because they're limited by the genre. I remember I listened to Amon Amarth when I was in high school, and I thought I was just whatever. I listened to Ailstorm, and it kind of sounded good because it did sound like pirate music but metal, and so it was kind of interesting. But like, again, there was not much to work with, and all their songs were about like getting drunk and being pirates, and it's like just stupid. I listened to Goblicon or Necrogoblicon or whatever that shit is called, one where the goblin like has a crush on his coworker, and there's this other guy that like she likes more, and he's like trying to get the girl and whatever. You probably know what video I'm talking about if you've searched goblin metal at all on YouTube. And it's like, whatever. I didn't bother looking up the lyrics, but it seemed like whatever the song was about didn't necessarily even have to do with the fact that the dude was a goblin, So like, aside from the fact that the genre as an idea is just not good, all the bands in those genres are also just not good. So because of that, I am going to have to put Viking metal, and they're not on this list, but if they were all similar genres, in F tier. Fight me. Next up, we've got thrash metal. So thrash metal, I kind of mentioned it before already. The whole point is just to play really fast. And it sounds stupid. Like, if I were to just describe what thrash metal is to someone who doesn't listen to metal, it doesn't sound like a very interesting idea. Maybe a little bit because just being able to play fast is impressive, and a lot of times you might like a certain band just because they can play impressively. But for the most part, it's just kind of fast. Like, okay, what more can you do, But there's a lot of really good thrash bands, the big four, just that example alone is enough to show that there's a lot of really good bands in this genre. To be honest, I can't really think of a whole lot of more examples other than the big four, but I think that kind of the big four is a kind of enough example. So as a genre, thrash metal is not that good, but the bands in thrash metal are really good, and I really like a lot of Metallica and Slayer. Just with those two bands alone, it kind of earns a high place for me. I'm gonna put it in A tier for now. It is a really good genre because of all the really good bands that are in it. So I might move it as I kind of think of the other genres and their places, but that's where it's going for now. Punk, this is going to be hard because I don't really even listen to that many punk bands. The only ones that I can really think of are like, I think Green Day qualifies as a punk band, which I don't listen to at all. I might have listened to like a few of their songs like a long time ago, and I don't remember at all what they sound like. The Misfits, I remember what they sound like for sure, and I know that they qualify as a punk band. The only punk band that I really listen to often is Rise Against. I think they're really good, but like that's it. So like it's hard for me to make an opinion. I think punk as a genre, like the idea is a good concept. It's like all about rebellion and you play pretty fast and it's like, but it's not necessarily like thrash where it's just like, From the ones that I remember, the Misfits, so I'm probably going to piss off a lot of people, but I think just kind of sound gay to me. I'm sorry. Rise Against, like I mentioned, I really like. I think they have some pretty good songwriting. They have a lot of songs that really kind of get you wanting to get moving. There's also a few like goth punk bands, like if I'm pronouncing it right, Bauhaus. I haven't really listened to them at all recently, but I remember they're really good. Maybe I shouldn't have even put them on the list because I can't judge very well, but I like punk, but it's not my main style, if that makes sense. I think I would rather listen to something like thrash metal because it's more metal. I'm more of a metal head. And punk is kind of more just kind of rock-ish, sort of. Punk is good, but I sort of have a lack of information, and then I also think I'd kind of rather listen to other things, so I am going to put it at C tier. Moving on to power metal. So here's the thing with power metal. I would want to say that bands like Judas Priest and Dio are power metal, but I think I would be wrong because that would be more like just classic OG heavy metal. And power metal bands kind of take that idea further. Like probably like things that would qualify as power metal would be like I can't remember the name of the band, Dragon Force. There you go. Stuff like that. And then there was one that my friend had introduced me to. Let me see if I can find it. Warcry, that's their name. They're a Spanish power metal band. The name of the album that I remember was El Sello de los Tiempos. They were pretty good. I think they would for sure qualify as power metal. The thing is, that's the only like reference that I have of like power metal. As the idea of the genre, I think is good. Basically, it's just really, really powerful sounding, powerful singing, really like energetic, like uplifting guitar playing. It's a good idea for a genre. I haven't listened to a whole lot of Dragon Force. I like Warcry, and I can't think of any other bands, so I kind of have a lack of information on there as well. So I guess the question becomes, do I want to listen to power metal more than I want to listen to punk or thrash metal? I think I would want to listen to power metal more than punk because I think there are some good bands in there, and it's more metal than punk is. But I still would want to listen to thrash metal more because it's just like heavier, and I think I know for a fact that there are really good bands in that genre, like the Big Four. So I'm gonna put power metal at B tier. Okay, so next we got nu metal. I don't have very many subscribers or followers or anything, but to the people who have kind of followed my channel and know of my music, which if you're watching and that's one of you, thank you by the way, but you probably know or have guessed that I'm more of a nu metal boy, because pretty much all the metal songs that I've written sound like nu metal. And yeah, pretty much nu metal is like my bread and butter. Like I grew up with Godsmack, Disturbed, and System of a Down, and then as I got older and got more into music and started discovering new bands, I found Korn and Slipknot, and I feel like maybe not so much now, but definitely like back then, like in the 2000s, when somebody thought of metal, the songs that they always thought of was like Down with the Sickness and Bodies and Chop Suey. And I feel like metal as a genre, it's so versatile. Like the whole point of nu metal is that you can add in different elements from different genres. So like you can have rap metal, and you can have a nu metal song with like electronic elements. You can put a little bit of industrial in there. You have metal that mixes in like Mexican elements, like El Nino. You can have like really grungy, dirty sounding metal like Korn or Cold Chambers. You can play it fast, you can play it slow. You can be silly like System of a Down. You can be really a downer with it too, like some of the sadder Deftones songs. From the standpoint of the versatility of the genre, the accessibility too, I feel like a lot of people could get into metal by listening to nu metal. The number of really good bands, and just the fact that I'm biased towards it because that's what I grew up with, I am going to put it in S tier. Fight me. All the people who say that new metal's not real. Metal genre, fight me. I don't care. So next we got metalcore. I don't really listen to a whole lot of metalcore. The thing that comes most to mind is like Austrian Death Machine, which is a joke band. The thing about metalcore is that a lot of bands like As I Lay Dying, they have the potential to sound really gay. Like you can have their verse section or whatever sounding pretty decently heavy with some, fast playing and like screaming, and but then you get to like the chorus and it all of a sudden switches to like a metal song to like Justin Bieber. And it's like, what the fuck? So like to me that kind of knocks it down for me a bit. But there are some bands that do it well. I guess the question is metalcore better than punk? To be honest, I don't feel like there's a lot of bands that are in metalcore that are that good, because a lot of them just sound K, and there's just very few that know how to do it well and don't sound stupid. I think I'm gonna have to put it at D. Next we got industrial metal. This is gonna be tricky again for me because I don't listen to a whole lot of industrial metal. The thing is, I don't know really what would qualify as industrial metal. I feel like the only thing that is like that I would listen to that really captures what industrial metal is supposed to sound like is 9 Inch Nails. Examples of industrial metal: Ministry, Godflesh, Marilyn Manson, Rammstein, Fear Factory. See, Marilyn Manson, I wouldn't have guessed that he's industrial metal. Neither Rammstein. Rammstein, I would have thought they would be like nu metal. Fear Factory just sounds like thrash to me. So I'm not exactly sure what the definition of industrial metal is supposed to be. To me, the definition of industrial metal was like 9 Inch Nails, which is like a really kind of like experimental, but not necessarily, but like just a lot of like, I guess a lot of sounds that wouldn't normally belong in metal. To me, it's kind of like the name implies, like industrial. I kind of think of a lot of like machine sounds, like really like clangy, grindy kind of sounds, which I guess also a little bit of on the electronic side maybe, or maybe that's just I'm thinking of the type of things that 9 Inch Nails does. But I mean, I guess industrial metal, the fact that I can't easily define what it's supposed to be is kind of telling me that I should put it a little bit lower, because it kind of detracts from the genre. But it just because Google says so, there's a lot of good bands in there like Rammstein, Marilyn Manson, 9 Inch Nails. I would rather listen to like Rammstein and 9 Inch Nails than like punk, I think. See, I almost want to put it at A just because 9 Inch Nails and Rammstein are really good. But I think the definition of the genre is so weird that I can't really, it's too vague. So I think I'm going to put it at B, but above power metal. There we go. Okay, so next we got grunge. Maybe technically grunge isn't a metal genre, but I threw it in there because it's kind of related. I think grunge as a genre is really good. It's almost kind of a slap in the face to like regular music, because the point of grunge is like to be just really nasty and like sloppy sounding. So you know, Nirvana has a lot of songs like that where they have a lot of feedback, a lot of really screechy sounds. The singing, a lot of them is just like really like like the song Very Ape, I think is like that. Pennyroyal Tea just has a very like grating kind of vocals. Pearl Jam has a very like sloppy kind of like sound. And then you've got like Alice in Chains is very like I probably sound like an idiot right now, but I'm sure you guys know what I mean. So as an idea for a genre, I think it's cool to be like really like grating and ugly and like just kind of go against what music people tend to think music should sound like, which is like good. Grunge kind of sounds bad on purpose. And then there's a lot of really good bands like the three that I just mentioned. So I think grunge is really, really good. I think it goes in A tier, but I'm not sure if it goes like behind or above thrash metal. I think it's kind of a tie with thrash metal. I don't think it really goes above or below it. I'm gonna put it on A tier. I'm gonna put it behind it just because, you know, for the sake of space. I think it's a tie with thrash metal. Okay, so next we got grindcore. Now grindcore as a genre, I love grindcore. I love just like being as fucking heavy as you can possibly be and just like making it sound like really noisy. Yeah, basically it's just like but the thing is, like 90% or maybe even more of all grindcore bands just suck. The execution is terrible. It just sounds, all grindcore bands sound the same basically. They just all play fast and low and just do vocals like all low all the time, and it just all sounds similar, and it's not good. There are very few that I think do it well. There's Spasm, Plasma. I can't think of any other ones. I have to put it pretty low because like most of the bands in the grindcore genre just suck, even though I like the genre. I think I have to put it at E because even though I think that's fair, because metalcore, even though it sounds kind of gay and I don't really necessarily like it, grindcore is just too mind-numbingly repetitive, at least most of the bands are, to be enjoyable. And whereas metalcore, at least there's room for, not that there's room for creativity, because there is room in any genre I think to be creative, but it's just metalcore can be, most metalcore bands are more creative than grindcore. So next we got doom metal. Again, doom metal as a genre I really like. Just slow everything down to the point where it sounds like oppressive and ominous and shit like that. I really like well, it's not, see, doom metal has a couple of subgenres that I'm not sure if I can, well, I mean, I guess I feel like I have to take into account all the subgenres to be able to judge it. So like sludge metal and drone metal. I really like Sun. That's probably the most famous example of doom, or more specifically drone metal. There's some sludge metal bands, or just generally more like slower bands that might fit in that genre, like a Pale Horse Named Death. I think belongs somewhere in the doom metal world, and they're really good. I think some people would even say Black Sabbath would be doom metal, just because they have that kind of slow, more like horror kind of sound. I would say that I mean, maybe, but they're more like just OG heavy metal. And then there's like all the bands that kind of came from that Black Sabbath sound, like I guess they call it stoner metal, which there's a lot of good bands in that genre. Some of them joke bands like Dr. Colossus, which is a Simpsons inspired band. They have a song called Stupid Sexy Flanders, which I would recommend you listen to because it's pretty good. Stone Jesus probably maybe kind of goes in the stoner, kind of slower paced metal. I would almost want to say Queens of the Stone Age, but they're more of a rock, like stoner rock, not really metal. But anyways, overall, good genre idea. Lots of good bands. Where would I put it though? The thing about, well, I mean, I guess it kind of depends on the band. I was going to say it's kind of hard to listen to. You can't just like pop a Sun song in the radio and be like, drive to work like that. But like stuff like Pale Horse Named Death, you can kind of groove to whenever you want, I feel like. Otherwise, for like drone metal, at least you have to be in the mood. So I was gonna say maybe put it in a lower place, but maybe not. Would like Triptychon and like the one album from Celtic Frost, Monotheist, qualify as like doom? Because that's really good too, and I love that shit. So I feel like because of like A Pale Horse Named Death and When I'm in the Mood, Sun, and like Triptychon's type shit, and like Stone Jesus too, it is really good. I feel like it belongs in B tier because it's a good genre, good bands, but because it is slower paced and kind of not as energetic. Generally, I like really energetic music, so you kind of have to be more in the mood for it, but it is good. So I feel like I want to put it at B tier, and I do think I want to put it above the other ones that I have there already. So, okay. Next, we got Gent. Now, this should be interesting. I like Gent. The Gent as a genre is really good, I think, for a couple of reasons. First one, just the tone, the guitar tone. Like, it sounds badass. Like, bam, 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 bam. And all the, like, heavy palm muting, like, really, like, staccato playing, I think sounds badass. I think there's a lot of songwriting that kind of lends itself to Gent that you can't really do that much with other genres. Like, really, like, just like confusing sounding stuff, really like erratic sounding stuff, both in terms of timing and what notes you choose. I think so. Gent, I think as a genre, I think is really good, and there's a lot of really good Gent bands. There's Meshuggah, there's After the Burial, I can't think of any more. I'm sure there's more. I think I tried listening to Periphery once, and I thought they were good, but I can't remember if they were like really good or kind of just like okay. But yeah, like overall, I think Gent is really good. I think it belongs in A tier. Like there's a lot of really good Gent bands, and as a genre, it just sounds cool. I guess the question is it better than thrash or grunge? Thrash metal, I feel like, kind of like I mentioned before, the genre is not that creative because it's just fast. Gent is more creative of a genre, I think. But what's holding me back from putting Gent in front of thrash is that the bands in thrash are better, I think. I think there's more good thrash bands that there are Gent bands. I had thrash and grunge tied, so in terms of where I'm gonna put Gent in relation to grunge doesn't matter. I'm just gonna put Gent in A behind thrash and grunge. Next we got deathcore. Deathcore is interesting. It's not like metalcore because it's death. It's not, it's heavy. It doesn't have any singing, so it's core, but it's not gay. It depends. Some of the bands are kind of like Suicide Silence are kind of gay. But there's a lot of bands that just aren't. Like most of the like super progressive vegan band, Cattle Decapitation is really good. Job for a Cowboy is really good. Thy Art is Murder is really good. So just a lot of really good bands. And deathcore as a genre just sounds fucking heavy. It can be fast and sound really heavy, or it can be slow and you can have breakdowns and it's really heavy. There can be a lot of energy behind it, or it can be a little bit more slow paced and be like like that kind of thing. I think it's a really good genre. But there's a fuck ton of deathcore bands that sound exactly the same. I think I would rather listen to deathcore than all the stuff that I have on B most of the time. Is it better than Gent? That's a hard decision because, well, I don't even listen to that much Gent, so I feel like I don't have that many examples of Gent bands. I know there are a lot of Gent bands out there, and I know some of them tend to sound the same because a lot of them kind of have a little bit of a more metalcore sound to it with Gent, and that kind of starts to blend in with each other. Deathcore has a lot more similar bands, I feel like, but it just sounds so fucking brutal. But Gent also can sound pretty fucking brutal too. That's hard. I think they're tied, to be honest. I think it belongs in A and is tied with Gent. Next, we've got death metal, classic death metal. Pretty good. It's death metal, some pretty good shit. Cannibal Corpse I like a lot. Dying Fetus I like a lot. Can't even think of that many more examples of death metal. Let me see. Examples of death metal bands. Cataclysm, Nile, Suffocation, Vader, Cannibal Corpse. I guess I don't listen to that much death metal because I haven't even heard of a lot of these bands. Yeah, like more classic death metal I don't listen to a lot of. It's just basically Cannibal Corpse and Dying Fetus. And Dying Fetus, I mean, I think it still qualifies as death metal, but it's technical death metal. Cannibal Corpse, I feel like in bands like that and like Dying Fetus, it elevates the genre a bit. But I have heard a lot of kind of shitty sounding death metal. Like a lot of when they were first making death metal, it was just basically thrash metal but with growls instead of like screams for the vocals, and it didn't sound very good. Like a lot of the vocals, because they were just I feel like they were just discovering the growls, didn't sound very good. The technique, they didn't have it down. It was just a lot of like that type of thing instead of like really like tight, like brutal sounding growls. Like old, like just to name an example, like old school Cannibal Corpse kind of has that sort of vocal style. I guess when I think of death metal, like OG death metal, I think of like really old school stuff, which a lot of I don't like. Like even like Cannibal Corpse, I would prefer listening to new Cannibal Corpse, or like Dying Fetus too. I would rather listen to new Dying Fetus because it sounds better to me. Like both the sound quality and like the vocals, it just sounds better to me. I think it goes in B tier. I feel like, to be honest, it kind of goes behind all of the other ones because, like I mentioned, all the more old school death metal bands just kind of sound shitty to me because of the crappy like vocals, and it just kind of sounds like thrash, like but with crappy growl vocals. Okay, so next we have got classic heavy metal. So this is shit like Scorpions, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, Dio, Motorhead, Van Halen. Black Sabbath would also go in there. I like a lot of these bands. Obviously they're the OGs, so I feel like that kind of has to give them a higher place. I really like Scorpions. I really like Dio. Iron Maiden is really good. Judas Priest is really good. I never listened to Motorhead. Van Halen is okay to me. Black Sabbath is really good. I almost can't define what the genre should be because it's like the OG. It's like distorted guitars. It's like rock, but like heavier. And it tends to have more of a, well, at least with like that Black Sabbath, it's more of like a horror approach to it, or maybe like takes the lyrics are more about darker themes than like regular like rock. But not always. Like Dio and Scorpions don't necessarily do that. So where do I put it? There's a lot of really good bands, like the ones in that little picture right there. But see, even though I have a lot of respect for those bands in the genre, it sounds old. It sounds old to me. Like I would rather listen to something more modern, because in general, the more modern stuff has more punch to it. I think I would rather listen to classic heavy metal than all the stuff that I have on B tier. But is it better than the stuff that I have in A tier? Maybe I... See, all of these are a bit more modern, except for maybe thrash metal, and generally have more punch, more of that punch that I'm looking for, that a lot of times the classic heavy metal doesn't really provide for me. But I feel like there's a lot of classic heavy metals that are better than like these genres that tend to be generic, with a lot of bands kind of sounding the same. I think, see, in this list, it's not really, you can never really make it a list, even if it's your own opinion, something that really represents it that well, or that's gonna even have a semblance of objectivity. So I don't think the place where I'm gonna put it really represents where it should go, but I'm just gonna do it because I need to put it somewhere. So what I'm gonna do, deathcore and gent, I'm gonna move over here, and I'm going to put classic heavy metal in the middle of A tier. Okay, last genre. So black metal. Where do we put black metal? Black metal as a genre, like as an idea, is interesting. First and foremost, it's about Satan, right? Satan. So I feel like I kind of have to give it props for that, just because it naturally is going to be like a more evil, like dark, like that, kind of genre. But also the thing about black metal, at least when you're recording black metal, is that it has to sound like shit. Like literally, like all the real true cult like black metal bands, all the recordings have really low audio quality to them, with the idea being that they don't want to make something that sounds really good and have it accessible to a lot of people and have it become mainstream, which I respect. But when one of the parts of the definition of the genre is it's supposed to sound like shit on purpose, like how good is that gonna be? It sounds like shit, literally. That's the point, And like a lot of like old school black metal, it just doesn't sound too great. Like it's a lot of tremolo picking, and it kind of gets repetitive. It's just kind of like, and the vocals just sound like I'm like some bands do it a little bit better than others. I feel like old school Gorgoroth is a good black metal that still has that washed out like black metal sound, but it's not like really great, like abrasive to like listen to. But then there's other ones that just like sound like just like a wall of sound that just kind of gives me a headache. But then there's like newer black metal that, like, to be honest, maybe can't even be classified as black metal. It's probably more like blackened death metal. So like new Behemoth and like maybe even new Gorgoroth too would kind of fall in that genre. That stuff I really like. So I feel like that right there kind of elevates the genre a bit. See, it's hard because I almost feel like all of these things I have to separate into their own categories, but I kind of have to group it all together under one umbrella of black metal. I would put black metal higher if it weren't for all the old school black metal that just sounds like shit on purpose. And maybe maybe not even on purpose, but just really the vocals, has all shitty, high, screechy vocals and repetitive guitars. I feel like that shit brings it down. So I feel like I'm gonna have to put it on C tier. I feel like maybe I would still rather listen to it than like a lot of metalcore that just sounds super gay. And then putting it behind punk because that sound quality is just. If it were like black and death metal more, it makes me want to put it higher. To be honest, I would probably put it like at maybe B or A, but then like I said, all the other shit it just brings it down to C. I feel like that kind of, I think that's a fair place to put it considering overall all the bands that exist within that genre. Those were all the genres that I had, so let me kind of review all the ones that I have. Nu metal at S, that's good for me. Thrash metal at A, that's good. Grunge at A, I think is pretty good or reasonable. Classic metal at A, I think makes sense. Gent at A. Maybe I should move Gent and deathcore to B. In fact, let me do this. I'm gonna change death metal to C. I'm gonna put it above black metal. I moved death metal to C kind of for the same reasoning as black metal because there's a lot of good death metal bands, especially like the newer kind of stuff. But there's a lot of older bands that kind of just sound like shit. But I put it above black metal because it doesn't sound as shitty as black metal does because they're kind of doing it on purpose. Let's move all this other stuff out of the way. Okay, so I moved gent and deathcore to B, which I feel like is fair because like A should be reserved for like the really, really good bands. So like thrash metal gets A because it's got the big four. Grunge gets A because it's got like Nirvana, obviously, Pearl Jam, like Soundgarden, Audioslave. Classic metal has all the classics, obviously it should go on A. And then next, all the stuff that doesn't have like really big like names as much, but it's still good, should go a little bit lower. So I got gent and deathcore there, which are good genres, but they tend to sound repetitive. Doom metal is good, but you gotta kind of be in the mood to listen to a lot of the bands because depending on which band it is, like Sun, you can't just like I mentioned, pop a Sun's CD and jam out to it. Industrial metal, it's still really good, and I feel like I would place it higher if it weren't for the genre being a little bit too vague. Power metal is good as a genre, and I think there are a lot of good bands in power metal, but there aren't, well, at least that I know of, there aren't a whole lot of power metal bands that I like, because I haven't listened to that much, so I feel like maybe I should even put it a little bit lower, because to be honest, I've listened to some power metal and it does have a little bit of a tendency to be generic sounding, like some of them kind of sound the same. Punk, I don't know where it should go in relation to punk though, because like I said, I don't even listen to punk. I don't even have any examples of really good solid examples of what punk represents, like what's the word for like the person that you send to represent a group of people, like that type of thing. Like I don't know what bands would be those people, those bands to represent punk. I think, okay, here's what I'm gonna do. Black metal. Okay, so I've got now in C tier death metal first, then power metal, then punk, then black metal. Black metal I'm comfortable being the last in C tier, and punk too in this place because I just don't have too much to go on, and even though I do think it's a good genre, I just don't have that many bands to draw off of to feel like, yeah, that's a good genre. Power metal, it's a good genre, but some of them sound the same, and I don't have that many bands to go off of, so I can't really judge it too well. Should I move death metal to B just because of the really good death metal bands like Cannibal Corpse? Or should I leave it there because of the other shitty bands that were like around the 80s that kind of just sound crappy? I think I'm gonna leave it there. So let's move this a little bit just to make it look nicer. Okay, I feel a little bit more comfortable with this list now. So nu metal at S because that's my favorite. Thrash metal, grunge, and classic metal at A because there's some pretty good legends on there. Gent, deathcore, doom metal, industrial metal because either they're a little bit less defined or they tend to sound a little bit the same, but there's still some really good bands on there. C, we've got, I guess that's pretty fair. C has a lot of really good bands, but there's also a lot of bands that bring it down. D, we've got metalcore because it sounds gay, but it's still somewhat listenable. E, we got grindcore because even though I like the genre, a lot of it is just garbage, to be honest. And then F, we've got Viking metal because fuck that shit. Okay, I think that's good. That's probably as close as I'm gonna get right now to a definitive tier list of genres, for me at least, in my opinion. I guess that would pretty much be it. Let me know in the comments what you think of my tier list. Let me know what you would have done different. Let me know if I have shit taste in music, whatever it might be. If you have suggestions for more genres for me to put on this list, I can make a part 2. If you have any suggestions, maybe I can do a tier list of bands. I don't feel like I'd be able to make a tier list of bands just with me thinking of random bands to put on, because I would naturally pick all the ones that I like the most, which would make it really difficult to categorize. But if people just kind of suggest bands, I can kind of take a listen to them, then decide, where they go based on what I thought about them. But yeah, so like any comments at all, any suggestions would be greatly appreciated. And I think that's gonna be it. Don't forget to like the video to support me. Leave a comment, like I mentioned, to give me suggestions and just kind of, get a little conversation going. Subscribe to keep updated on my newest videos. I also do my own music, like I mentioned before. So check out that on the website, links below, or you can always just go to whatever digital platform you use the most, Spotify, iTunes. I got merch on my website too, check that out. But yeah, that's gonna be it for now. Yeah, I'm gonna stop now to avoid talking nonstop and sounding like an idiot. So, bye.